up.
Okay. Are we ready to go? Okay. Well, hello everybody. My name's David Moss and I have the privilege of being chair of the Poole Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our annual members meeting today. Of course, we would have liked to have held this meeting in person, but I'm sure you'll understand the special circumstances present time have made this impossible. But anyway, we're very grateful for you joining this meeting by Teams, and we hope that you'll find it interesting and informative. I'm just going to run through the format for the hour, and then after a few introductory remarks, I'll hand on to the speakers. The programme is that I'll be followed by Debbie Fleming, our Chief Executive, who will be giving a summary of the past year and a bit of a look forward to the future. She'll be followed by Pete Patworth, our Chief Financial Officer, who will summarise the annual accounts for last year. Pete will be followed by Steve Heath, who will give the annual membership report. Steve is the Deputy Lead Governor. And then the important thing for all of you is the question and answer and discussion session. There are a lot of important things we'd be keen to discuss. There is a question and answer bar, so if you want to write in any questions, we've had one in advance, but if you want to write in any questions, we'll pick them up at the question and answer session, because we're very keen to engage with you, and we've got a lot of interesting news to share with you as well. So without more ado, I'll hand over to Debbie, who's going to give us an overview of last year and what's in store for the future. Debbie.
Thank you very much, David. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me okay, and hopefully with the wonders of our technology and our great team behind the scenes, hopefully you can see me as well. Really good to be with you again here today for our annual general meeting, annual members meeting. Really strange to be looking back at last year, which when we look at all that's happened and how much time's gone by, we have to really stop and say, actually, what happened in that particular financial year before COVID? And of course, towards the end of the quarter, COVID had arisen. But we just want to take stock and to say, actually, an awful lot happened in that time. And as always, hugely proud of the trust. So if we can have a first slide. So just really important when we're thinking about Poole, this will be very familiar to many of you who've supported the trust for a long time. We think about Poole in three areas really. The first is thinking about it serving the local population, particularly the local people of Poole and Purbeck, and we have services that we provide, our medical and surgical services, general services for our very local population. But the middle bit really is the one that we work very closely on in partnership with the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, that we actually work together to provide services for people on the eastern side of the county, and the two sites, the two trusts have been working really closely together for many years with particular lead services. So we know that in Poole we're the East Dorset Trauma Unit. We have all the majority of the maternity services based at Poole, children's services, ear, nose and throat services, and those who know the trust well will know that we're one of the largest trusts in the country for the provision of fractured neck of femur, and we get really good outcomes from all those hip operations that we do after someone's fallen and broken a hip. But very important to remember that as Poole we do serve the whole of the Dorset population, around 750,000 population, that Poole houses the Dorset Cancer Centre, that we lead on oral surgery and neurological surgery that we provide for people across the whole of Dorset, and we're the lead on bowel, breast and cervical screening. So good to remember we're a medium-sized trust. We employ about 4,000 people. We're supported hugely by our roughly 250 volunteers, and our turnover 293 million. It sounds an awful lot of money. We could spend it many times over, but we would be deemed to be a medium-sized organisation. Next slide, please, Kat. So looking back on 2019-20, another very, very turbulent year. Now, I've been Chief Executive here at Poole since 2014, and I would have to say, I think I've probably been saying it's been quite turbulent every year. None of them have been quiet. I really do think that 2019-20 has been the most challenging of all. I mean, partly we've had the backdrop of moving closer towards merger with the Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch hospitals, and we've been joining up more and more of our services. We appointed the shadow board during the course of that year. But from a service point of view, we've had significant pressures going on across the Dorset system throughout the winter period. Nothing new there at that time. Ongoing workforce challenges, national and workforce shortages, and given those lead services that we provide, if we take, for example, oncology, that's been an area, there are very big shortages of oncologists. That's been a worry for the Trust for some time, and those have been ongoing. I'd forgotten until I was actually preparing these slides about the pensions challenge that took place during the year. Lots of things have been resolved since then, but we actually lost quite a bit of our consultant workforce, very senior staff workforce, as people reduced their sessions because there were changes nationally in the pensions arrangements that meant it was very difficult for them to carry on working as many hours as they did. So that was a really big impact in the year that was unusual. And what about Brexit? Since the outbreak of COVID, we're beginning to talk about Brexit a bit now, but actually the last few months we haven't been thinking too much about Brexit, and yet at the start of the year that was very much a big feature, and we weren't sure exactly what that would mean for us. Lots of planning and preparation around Brexit. And then of course, as we moved into the fourth quarter of the year, we had the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and culminating in lockdown in March. So a really, really busy and lively time. Thanks, Karen. So against that backdrop, though, as always, I am just hugely proud of the Trust. And yet again, the staff within Poole Hospital have achieved a great deal. I think it's really important to flag the service changes, the innovation, the ongoing innovation that we've had. That's a big feature of the Trust. So I've just put a few examples up here. We developed and introduced the virtual fracture clinic so we could see far more patients than we would normally see in a clinic setting. We introduced the one-stop shop in outpatients for head and neck cancer patients. There's a big programme introduced around trying to improve flow through the hospital called the Perform Quality Improvement Programme. All our staff got heavily involved in that to see how could we really reduce delays, what could we change in the way we communicated, how quickly we were able to meet needs so that we could flow people through the hospital as swiftly as possible and get people back home as swiftly as possible. Really proud at that time about getting our quality of care rated highly by the CQC, the Urgent and Emergency Care Services. That was great. And our brain injury rehabilitation service celebrated 25 years of service here at Poole, and it does make me feel very old, but I was actually here when we opened the brain injury service. I haven't moved away from the Trust since then, but that was one of the services that I had the privilege to work with colleagues to establish here at Poole, and my goodness me, we are so proud of that team now. At the same time, we've continued to win awards. We had our Young People's Diabetes Service. The Maternity Support Worker was named the Royal College of Midwives Support Worker of the Year. And of course, our annual awards evening that took place in the year showcased lots and lots of examples of areas where staff won awards and had contributed nationally and locally to improving services. I think when we look at how turbulent the year was, I'm really proud of the fact that we've continued to maintain safe, high quality care. We've maintained a really good focus on the prevention of infection, and that shows in some of the results that we can see in the annual report. And we've seen an overall reduction in falls, which was an area that we've also looked at very carefully and been wanting to improve over a period of time. And in particular, a reduction in the falls with harm. We've continued to receive very positive patient feedback, and of course each patient's experience really, really matters to us. And we've continued to have a positive and engaged workforce at a time of massive change and uncertainty, so we've been proud of that. I think overall though, when I look back, and we know that COVID has gone on since the end of the last financial year, but we've maintained essential services through the COVID pandemic, with very good outcomes for patients. When we look at the data, the audit data we've had from our intensive care unit, I am so proud of Poole, the Poole staff, the Poole teams, and the way that people stepped up, putting themselves at risk, but making sure that we maintain safe care and essential services as the COVID pandemic came upon us. Next slide. So just thinking about some of the nice things going on, just homing in on some of those. Our Jubilee celebrations. So we will not forget, will we, that it was our 50th anniversary last year, and we had lots and lots of celebrations. And I've got a picture on the next slide. We'll show so many of those lovely pictures. Perhaps we could just move on to that one. We know that we celebrated in July. With all the cakes that went round to every ward. We had the garden next to the Dirlston ward was officially reopened after we took away the walkway. Does everybody remember the footprints through the walkway as we were waiting for our new entrance to be finished? And the main entrance was a great feature that I'll come on to in a moment. And then in the Dolphin Courtyard, David and I planted a tree to commemorate the 50th anniversary, which fittingly has the common name Cascading Hearts. So that's that lovely picture in the middle there. So a really happy time in July celebrating our Golden Jubilee. And then on the next slide, we could remember we had further celebrations in September, because this was, again, we had two more days of celebrations. We had the day when Harry Redknapp came down and opened our main entrance. That was fantastic, and we had the photo opened in the main reception, reenacting the photograph that had been taken when the hospital was first opened. Those pictures are amazing. We also had our awards evening, took place in September, and we distributed these lovely water bottles. They're beautiful colours there, but our staff were delighted to receive these just as a little token to say thank you to staff, and we had a big thank you day. And we got the lovely picture there in the middle on our public open day. That was a really, really happy time, and it was wonderful to be able to mark 50 years birthday for Poole Hospital. What a really lovely occasion. So on the next slide, we can see again, we had our CQC inspection, and again, this was something we are hugely proud of. So once again, we achieved a good overall rating from the CQC. We were so pleased and proud to receive outstanding for caring. That was wonderful, and absolutely a really well-earned reflection of the quality of care provided from our staff. We were so pleased to get good for well led. To maintain good for well led, and we got good for use of resources. So that was all overall so encouraging. Now we know, as is the case with any CQC inspection, there's always things that they find that they recommend for improvement, and the CQC were very clear with us that the majority of the things that they fed back, much of which was around strengthening governance and things across the organisation, they expected us to implement those changes as we became established as a merged organisation with Bournemouth. So there are a few things that needed to be acted on. We've already started work on that action plan. Lots has been achieved already, but some of the longer term changes they were expecting to see carried out through the course of this year as and when we merged, because we'll be setting that up as part of the new organisation. So we can have the next slide. When we think about performance, this is quite a challenging one to summarise really. We always look at the A&E target, don't we, the 4-hour target, but we know that in Poole last year we were part of the national pilot where we stopped reporting on the 4-hour target, and instead we're looking at a whole range of different indicators that people feel are a much better reflection of the way in which we're delivering our ED services. The standard that we look at most now is around mean time in the department, the length of time people are in the department, and trying to look at that and make sure it's not too long, because for a long time people have felt that 4-hour target could sometimes distort priorities. So we don't have the 4-hour position in our annual report in the way that we would have done in the past, and that's still an area that we are working on to try and minimise the time in the department, and Mark may be able to say a bit more about that if people have got questions a bit later on. If we look at our challenges, of course, numbers of patients have continued to increase. Nobody reduced the numbers throughout the year as we were looking at the pressures on services, and there have been pressures on both emergency and elective services. And I mentioned earlier about the pension changes, which meant that some of the capacity that we had to meet demand was reduced. So by the end of February, and of course by March, things were quite different once we moved into lockdown, but at the end of February, demand for elective care had grown by 2% compared with the year before, and the activity around both day cases and outpatient follow-up attendances had gone up by 5%, so ongoing pressures around demand. We know that we were challenged throughout the year around our RTT, this referral to treatment target, the 18-week access standard. That was problematic, and it had been for some time. And we have been working with partners in the Dorset system to really better match the capacity and demand for services. But we were very proud that at the end of the year, the total number of patients waiting had not increased compared to the previous year, and that was very important to us. Again, COVID has distorted a lot since then. We've managed to broadly retain the total numbers waiting, but we are now worried, as we're very openly saying, we are worried about the length of time that some patients are having to wait. It was challenged before COVID, and it's continued and become even more challenging since then. So perhaps we can have the next slide. One of the areas that we're really proud of has been our diagnostic access to diagnostic services, and we've done extremely well with 99% of waits within the 6-week target throughout the year. It's something our teams work very hard on. Endoscopy, pre-COVID and post-COVID, this is one of the areas that we're most challenged now, and you'll see this actually if you were in any hospital's annual members meeting now across the country. Endoscopy is an area of particular challenge, and that's very much so in Dorset, and definitely for us here in Poole. In general, the trust performed really well in its cancer standard. We actually didn't meet the 62-day standard at the end of February because of some of the challenges around diagnostic waits and some of the late referrals as well, which have happened even more so through COVID. But I think we should be proud of what was achieved. We know that we didn't achieve all of the targets that we would normally have expected to do or would have wanted to do, but actually our staff, where they weren't achieved, they were generally just only just missed. Okay, if we have the next slide. Very important to hear what our patients are saying, and as I said earlier, we do, of course, we get complaints. You'll see that in the annual report, but on the whole, we get very positive feedback from our patients, and it's lovely to get when people take the time to write in and say things like they're saying in these slides. You know, brilliant, thank you. Everyone who treated me looked after me so well. Even in the difficult circumstances, nothing was too much trouble. That's very familiar for me when I hear feedback about our staff. In maternity, we know that our maternity services are amazing. Our midwives, our obstetricians, people are so good. The staff in the Haven Suite, to the maternity suite, the doctors, the anaesthetists, the staff on postnatal ward, they were all amazing. They were so caring and helpful. It is lovely to get that feedback. We're very, very proud of our staff. So on the next slide, we can have a little look at what the staff themselves are saying. And I think we have to remember, again, what a hugely challenged and uncertain time Poole Hospital has been working through, and last year was no exception. Our staff, many of our staff are recognising and expecting that they'll be moving site over the next few years. We are an organisation moving towards merger. And a very uncertain time. So we've been very proud of the fact that despite all that turbulence, our results have stayed in the top 25% in the country. And our staff do recommend Poole as a place for care, very important to us, and they recommend it as a place to work. And some things we measure annually and some we measure quarterly, but on all of these we've seen good progress. I think one of the areas that we were very concerned about from the previous staff survey was staff's feedback on the quality of appraisals, and we were delighted in our survey to see that that had improved. And we also saw that their feedback around the support from their immediate manager, that had improved. And there's some lovely comments in there. So we know that everything's not all perfect, and we do get some negative feedback, and we also know that there are things we want to improve. We did a lot of work with a thing called the Story of Now during the course of the year, listening to our staff about the things that were getting in the way of doing a good job. That was a very important piece of work, and we have acted on that feedback to make sure that the things that were getting in the way often was around equipment, some of the resources that we needed for staff to do a good job. We've acted on that, and I think people are feeling more encouraged. And of course, lots has gone on during COVID where staff have felt really, really supported and valued. So just another point to make throughout the course of the year, just important to remember, if we could just go back the slide on appointments, Kat, please. We had some changes. So we said goodbye to our lovely Mark Orchard. Many of you will remember Mark. He was our Director of Finance, but we said hello and a big warm welcome to Pete Papworth, who was appointed as the Interim Joint Director of Finance over both Poole Hospital and the Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch Hospitals. And Pete will be presenting the financial report in a few minutes, has done such a fantastic job. He and Mark have been good colleagues, known each other for many, many years. And in fact, that transition went so smoothly, and we're very, very fortunate to have Pete with us now. Really delighted. We also made some other appointments all around trying to bring services together in advance of the full merger. And we've made some good appointments around our clinical transformation leads, who've done such a great job in joining up services around trauma and orthopaedics, emergency medicine, theatres and anaesthetics, and older people's medicine. And we're seeing now recruitment is much stronger in these areas because we're moving towards merger, and particularly older people's medicine. We've been delighted with the new consultants we've been able to appoint on the Bournemouth site as we've joined up and done much more joining up between Poole and Bournemouth over the last year or so. And the list has been expanded. So on to the next slide. So that was having a little look back. Now we want to have a little look forward, and I'm just going to finish with a few more slides looking to the future. And in case anyone hasn't heard or has missed this, the news of this week is that University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust will definitely be established on the 1st of October 2020. This is amazing news. So we've had a really exciting time over the last couple of weeks. We've had our board to board with our regulator. We have had confirmation from them. We had confirmation from the Competition and Markets Authority earlier in the year, but from NHS Improvement we had the formal confirmation from them to say that they were happy for us to merge as well. We've had the votes, so on Tuesday the two boards voted on the merger, and our two Council of Governors have voted on the merger, and so we are now all set. I'm expecting to receive the formal orders and documents tomorrow. It's all been approved, so that is amazing news. I'm so delighted. So if we could have the next slide, just a few slides to remind us the context of our merger. What is this all about? Well, we've been working on this since 2011. 9 years our clinicians have been talking together about what they could do better together. And we know that the merger is absolutely essential to delivering sustainable services, high quality services in East Dorset. It's a key enabler of all of the creation of this new vision for the emergency and planned hospitals, and it unlocks a lot of money for us. We've got £8 million has been identified in terms of the merger itself, but actually it unlocks over £200 million worth of estate reconfiguration, and we're getting £208 million in from the national sources, and of course our overall programme is even bigger than that with our own monies as well. We are going to be doing some brilliant things for our patients over the next few years, and we've started now. Wherever we are, whatever we're doing, the larger scale, the bigger organisation makes us more resilient, better able to meet the needs of our patients, whatever the scenario, and particularly during COVID. So we go on to the next slide. So this is just some of the things I've said already. It really is good news for us all. We know that everybody on the eastern side of the county already uses both sites. We need it depending on what service is needed, because the two trusts lead on different things. Local people currently need and use both acute hospital sites. The new organisation will be much stronger than either its predecessors, and we're seeing that in terms of being able to recruit staff, which is really important. And we want this to be a great place to work. We're all working hard on that. We've made fantastic progress already. The two organisations have been working so closely together, and we're going to build on all of this. And we have got so many wonderful, highly skilled and talented people working across all three of our sites, all committed to developing and providing great care. So we're looking to do all this and carry this ongoing as we've started into the future. It is a very challenging time, and we are facing a lot of challenges, and right in the forefront of our minds is obviously the winter. We know what we're hearing in the press and the media about COVID, and the fact that actually we're seeing more COVID now out in the community. So we've got a lot of challenges to address, but we expect to do that. We're working together to devise solutions to our problems, and we're expecting to successfully deliver our goals over the coming months and years. We've got great people and I'm very optimistic. If we just go on to the next slide, just very briefly, I've touched about this, and as members and governors, you all know you are used to looking at all the benefits of the merger. We talk a lot about the clinical and patient benefits, which you can see on the top left-hand side of this slide. I have to say, increasingly, I look to the bottom left, to the workforce. And with all the workforce shortages, it's wonderful that more people want to come to work in Dorset and work in our hospitals now because of the changes that we're making. That is really good news. Lots of other benefits on those slides. I won't go through the detail, but happy to take questions on those. On the next slide, we can just remind ourselves again that we're building on the best of both our organisations. We've got two good organisations with good CQC ratings. Bournemouth was rated outstanding for well led. Poole was rated outstanding for caring. What a brilliant start. We're not looking at making a massive change from the 1st of October. Lots of people won't notice any difference. We're going for what we call safe and legal to get in post the people that we need to start the merged organisation. We've appointed probably about 40 people already, people like myself, some of the other care group leads, the deputy directors, those sorts of roles. We've got the good foundation now from the 1st of October, and we'll be introducing more changes as we go along in an orderly way, making sure at all times that we're doing things in a safe way. And everybody will be transferring into the new organisation from the 1st of October under 2P, and we'll be building on the best. Both trusts have got a fantastic positive culture, both have got high staff engagement scores, and we want University Hospitals Dorset to be even better than either of the predecessor organisations. I'll show you a lovely picture now of the board. You will have seen this before, but there's all of our bright, shiny faces. Our non-executive directors taken from the two predecessor trusts. It's wonderful. We've got a very, very strong set of non-executive directors with a wealth of experience and backgrounds, different backgrounds from outside the health service that they bring in to help us with our strategic decision making and making sure that we stay on track with all our plans. And then the executive directors, again, you may know these people. Some of them may be less familiar. I think you know myself and Mark. So me as the chief executive, Mark, our chief operating officer. Pete's been in his joint post now for, as we know, for about a year. Peter Gill, who in charge of IT, he's been providing a service across the two trusts now for many, many years. And the others you may not know so well, but they've been working very closely with me. They've been part of my team now for 18 months. And I'm really delighted and looking forward to getting to know Alison and Paula and Richard and Karen if you don't already. So on the next slide, we've been doing some good work together, working with our staff and listening to our clinicians. We've got a great vision about transforming services. We've got a great mission around providing excellent healthcare and being a great place to work. And we've got 5 strategic goals that are probably pretty similar to the goals that the two predecessor organisations had, because you know, we want to do great things, and that hasn't changed. And then the work we're involved in now that you'll see on the next slide is all about developing our values. As I've said, both trusts have got a very strong value set, and we've been working and listening to staff. We didn't want to rush this work. We wanted to really listen to what people felt was important to them in building and shaping the new organisation. And so we will be getting all that feedback, looking at that in detail next month, and we'll be formally launching the new values in November. So look out for that slide. So the University Hospital status, this is great news. So this is benefits for everybody. So our patients will really benefit because more people will get access to clinical trials. Our staff will benefit because of all the emphasis on research and innovation and education and training. That is very valuable for staff who want to develop their careers, and it will help us with recruitment and retention. Great news to be a university hospital. So our priorities moving forwards, if we look at the next slide, these are pretty consistent, I guess, very similar to what I'd have been saying last year. Preparing for the winter, managing COVID. That I didn't know that word really last year, but that's a big feature. Really embedding this joined up positive culture, building on the great cultures that we've got on both sides. Recruiting and retaining great people, managing our money. We've got a very challenging savings programme, and we have to continue to work with partners to manage demand. Looking at where do we need to improve our performance. All of our clinicians and all of our teams want to do the very best they can. and maintaining relationships, because if we work closely with our partners, we know we can do the very best job for you and for our patients. Overall, our priority is very similar. We want to deliver our great transformation agenda in partnership with others, and that's what's driving us going forwards. So I think that's probably the end of my slide set. I know we're going through all of the slides and then we'll be taking questions later, but I'll just sort of pause there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Debbie. A lot of food for thought. Just want to make a couple of comments before we hand it. We're echoing a little bit. Can people switch their microphones off? Thank you. Just want to add a couple of things. I think the University Hospital's Dorset status is really important. I mean, we're all delighted about the formation of the new trust, but University Hospital status means that we will be one of the 40 designated university hospitals. It gives us a tremendous opportunity to become a centre of excellence nationally. So that's really important in terms of quality of service and our ability to recruit staff. You've heard about the ambitious programme of service and capital development over the next 4 to 5 years. This really is a once in a generation opportunity to totally transform and improve our services from a very good base. So we're very excited about that. So without more ado, I'll hand on to Pete then for a few headlines about the financial performance for last year. Pete.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here presenting my first ever set of Poole Hospital accounts this afternoon. We started the year with a very challenging financial plan, and that included a very ambitious SIP target, and it's great to be able to sit here at the end of the year and report that we achieved that financial plan overall, and we reported a balanced financial position. It's worth pointing out, however, and very important to remember, that Poole Hospital has been financially unsustainable for a number of years now and currently has an underlying deficit of around £18 million. That's supported by national sustainability funding, which allowed us to get back to our break-even position. This underlying financial deficit reflects some of the challenges Debbie's mentioned, particularly around the significant operational pressures, with more patients requiring acute care within our hospital and those patients staying longer than they have previously, together with some of the workforce challenges, including the pensions challenges. It also reflects, however, the particular mix of services that Poole Hospital provides, and that's why the merger is so important, and the clinical services review going forwards to balance that mix of services and ensure a financially sustainable organisation going forward. The deficit doesn't reflect any financial control issues, and that's evidenced through the use of resources rating of good by the Care Quality Commission, and it's a credit to all of our budget managers in Poole Hospital that we've been able to deliver that financial position against a very challenging set of financial assumptions at the start of the year. We had a very significant capital programme of £18.5 million. That was made up of a number of estate schemes, significant IT spend and significant expenditure on medical equipment. We also saw further spend in relation to the early works for the clinical services review. We were very fortunate during the financial year to be able to secure some additional national funding to support our services for same-day emergency care, the start of our theatres programme, and also some capital funding for imaging. We ended the year with a positive closing cash balance of £7 million, and that was a much better performance than we were expecting. That reflected largely the timing of some of our payments and does remain a very challenging position for the organisation going forward. And in March and the latter part of February, as Debbie said, we started to see the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, and we started incurring very significant costs in terms of managing our response to that. That has been reimbursed through national funding, and that was just over £500,000 of capital funding and just over £500,000 of revenue funding within Poole Hospital. Despite all of these financial challenges, though, it's really pleasing to say that we've been able to continue our strong performance in relation to paying our suppliers on time, and had 93% of all valid invoices paid within our agreed terms. If I come on to the next slide, this just sets out the external audit opinion on our accounts, which was very positive and reflected an unqualified opinion across the board. So a clean bill of health from KPMG, our external auditors, both in terms of the financial statements, further positive assurance in relation to our use of resources, so how we're spending our funding and whether we're receiving value for money for our taxpayers. And in terms of our going concern, our ability to continue as a foundation trust, there was an emphasis of matter just relating to the fact that we are planning to merge, and now that's been confirmed that we will merge on the 1st of October with the Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch hospitals. On the next slide, I just wanted to set out some of our financial challenges going forward and the particular position we're in at the moment. So in response to COVID-19, there was a range of national interim financial arrangements that were put in place, and this was a really positive national response to reduce the bureaucracy and ensure that hospitals had the funding they needed so as they could provide appropriate care in a very timely manner and rapidly changing environment to support our patients. Those interim arrangements are in place until the end of September. And consistent with these, our income is no longer conditional upon activity levels or our financial performance, and income is received through 3 funding streams: a fixed monthly payment from our commissioners, and that reflects income reported during a particular period last year, uplifted for inflation. A further fixed monthly top-up payment from NHS England Direct, and that reflects the difference between the fixed income payments and our average expenditure during the same period. And then we receive a retrospective true-up payment to cover the specific costs we incur in responding to the pandemic. And this allows us to report a financial break-even on a monthly basis. As a result of those arrangements, we have reported a financial break-even each month to date, and that's supported by a variable retrospective true-up payment, and that will continue up until the end of September. Financial allocations have now been received from October through to the end of March, and we're just working through the detail of how those allocations will compare against our expected expenditure for the remainder of the financial year. So I'll pause there, David, but at the end, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very satisfactory financial outturn in the difficult circumstances. Okay, well, this is the time we turn to you, the members and the governors, for questions and discussion. I've so far logged 2 questions, one from Sharon Collett, who's a public governor, and one from Valerie Leppard. So perhaps we can...
Sorry, David. Steve Heath is online, and he's got some slides ready to present.
How could I forget? I do apologise, Steve. We must take your important overview of the member activity in the year before we open it up to questions and answers. I'm getting carried away by the excitement. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me, first of all? Just nod if you can.
Yes.
Super. Well, yeah, no apology required. It's been an exciting year, so it's very easy to get carried away, particularly with the good news from this week. Pleasure to be invited to give this update on behalf of the governing group. I joined as a governor in November 2018. It's been a very interesting year, a very interesting 2 years, but particularly this last year. It's been a year of extra challenges, and more of that later, but let's do some facts and figures first of all. So next slide, please. We have an obligation to try and attain 6,700 public members, and we just about achieved it, 6,747. Staff and volunteers make up the balance. Staff are automatically recruited as members of the trust unless they choose to opt out. Very few do. One of the things that we've been trying to do this sort of past 12 months or so is increase the breadth and the diversity of the membership group. At this point, I think it's worth reiterating what Debbie and others have said about the response that the staff at Poole have given to the COVID pandemic or the COVID situation. They responded as expected with a high degree of professionalism, and the governing group was very impressed with the way in which the hospital has faced that, and Bournemouth as well. And overall, although we've been less impacted than some parts of the country, I think we performed very, very well. The University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust, bit of a mouthful. Governing group has been working closely with our colleagues at Royal Bournemouth in this. We've had legal responsibility, so we've been trying to represent your opinions into this particular scenario. And as Debbie said, both governing groups, Poole in particular, that I'm part of, voted in the affirmative for this particular merger. We think there are many, many, many benefits that will come for that, and we wouldn't have voted otherwise. Before we move on, a big thank you to our members. It's been a difficult year, but you've been continuing to support us. So a big thank you to our members, and that's you out there today. Next slide, please. The membership, we broadly try and reflect the population that we serve. Obviously, there are slightly more female or older members that have a participation in this kind of scenario. Eligibility for membership set out in the Constitution. You can see that on the website. We do try and get more and more people to join. It's very important that we continue to reflect the diversity of the population, and that we continue to get more interest and more people participating in the ongoing work of Poole Hospital and ultimately in the trust as well. So far as the trust is concerned, the new trust that will be formally in place on October 1, there will be an automatic transfer of membership from the Poole Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, which you're currently members of, into the new trust. So that will happen automatically unless you choose to opt out. But that will be notified in other ways, particularly through the website. So please look for that. Next slide, please. When you do want to join, very easy. It's on the website, just click, and it's very easy to find. It used to be hidden a little bit more, but now it's very easy to join. There are electronic membership forms, and a lot of people are joining through that. We also have Facebook, and very much of the moment in terms of our membership approach. So next slide, please. As well as trying to represent views, we and hold the governors to, not the governors, the non-executives to account. Part of our approach is to listen as best we can. It's been a bit harder these last few months, obviously, with COVID, but we've held as many local events and listening events as we can to try and hear what the members have to say. This is an example of some of the things that we've done. The link with Bournemouth Hospital, the Bournemouth University Freshers Fair, to try and encourage more and more of the younger members of our population to participate actively in the growth of, and the movement of the hospital. So your governor group is as active as it can be. Many of the events are now virtual, obviously, but we've done our best to try and keep up this membership strategy approach. Next slide, please. These are your governors currently through until the end of the month, ably led by Richard Negus, our lead governor, who I believe has given 9 years or so of service to the hospital. So thank you, Richard, for that. And thank you to the rest of my governor colleagues as well, who've all put in a lot of work this year. I didn't realize how much work was going to be involved when I became a governor a couple of years ago, but it's very rewarding, it's very interesting, and I would encourage members who are considering standing for the new NHS Foundation Trust to really actively think about that, because it's a good thing to do, it's a good thing to volunteer for, and you'll get a lot of enjoyment, pleasure, and can make a contribution. So thank you to my members and my co-members there. James Miles probably has the largest constituency, also known as the rest of England, so he has a very broad remit to try and cover. So please, next slide. So what do we do? What do the governors do? Well, we have several routes, several activities and requirements that we have to fulfill. Part of that is making sure that the rules and regulations are upheld and that we do hold the non-executives to account so that they can make sure that the executive is held to account. So we have an advisory and a sort of a legalistic role as well, which includes things like making sure that remuneration, allowances, we approve a lot of things. And as well as approving things, we also, next slide, see a lot of information. So this particular executive group led by Debbie and David, I think have been very open and transparent. They do share a lot of information, nothing's hidden. We're fully involved as governors, and I expect that to continue in the new trust. So we receive a range of things, the annual reports, the annual patient experience. As I say, nothing's hidden from us, and we feel very much a participatory, a fully participatory part of the process. We had to approve the new constitution, which is the UHD NHS FT, and we do various other things as well, too numerous to mention. Plus, we also have undertaken a range of training events and networking events. As I say, latterly in a sort of a more virtual session, but it's a very active sort of thing to be doing. And as I say, I would recommend that you consider standing, or if you can't stand, think of your friends, your colleagues, your family who might be appropriately qualified, really, to want to become a governor. So next slide, please. Inevitably, with the movement towards the merger of the two hospitals to form a new, well, the hospitals are not merging, the two trusts are merging to form a new political entity, a governing entity. We've had a lot of activity over the last 6-12 months, really, with our colleagues at Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch. Multiple events to look at the merger transactions, a lot of work being done by a range of governors, detailed work as well, to work out, were the rules being followed, was an appropriate process being followed, etc., etc. And we also listened as best we could to as many inputs from the public as well, from our members. We had various listening events such as Castle Point, Westbourne Arcade and so on, to try and pass back to the non-execs and to the board the feelings of the membership. Next slide, please. As we look forward to the future, I would echo what Debbie says. It is very exciting. Moving to hospital university status is very important in being able to attract high quality personnel that we may not have been able to attract previously. It's an interesting place to be if you're a clinician, a more interesting place to be. There will be a new set of governors appointed, so the group that you saw previously will be disbanded, and many of them will choose to stand for re-election. Those elections will be notified from the 16th of October. So as of the 1st of October, the new trust will come into force, and there will be a sort of a statutory process that has to be followed. The electoral commission type activities that go on to make sure that the new governors are appointed and elected in a correct way. Please do, as I say, consider standing, or if you can't, a family member or friend. Next slide, please. The new group, or the new group of governors, will really have the same standing activities and mandated responsibility to continue to support the board of directors of the Enhanced Trust and their staff in the implementation of the changes that are going on. We will continue as best we can to hold events in a variety of public fora, COVID rules applying, of course, for as long as they do need to. But I would at this point say, your support for the new trust is vital as members, and the members from Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch as well. But remember, this is still your hospital. Poole General isn't going away as a hospital. It's the umbrella organisation that is changing, growing, developing. But Poole General Hospital is still your hospital, so please continue to support it. And finally, next slide. If you do wish to contact the governor, there's a number there. There's a website, members contact Poole NHS, etc. You know where the hospital is, in Longfleet Road. And on a personal note, thank you very much for your support from the members of the public who've interacted with me over the last 2 years. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that excellent presentation, which I nearly cut short, which would have been a great shame.
You nearly never let me get started.
And I take the opportunity to thank our governors. As you've heard, they've put in a tremendous voluntary contribution to supporting our hospital. Okay, well, this is now the time for your questions and discussion, and the speakers will respond, and we're also joined by other senior staff. We've got Matt Thomas, who's our medical director, Mark Mould, who's our chief operating officer, Jacqueline Cockgrove, who's our director of human relations, and Sue Reed, who's group director of nursing. So they will join in as appropriate for your questions. And as I was beginning to say, I've logged 2 questions so far, and perhaps we can take those, and then if there are any other questions that the members want to raise, we'll be happy to have a go at those too. So if I can take Sharon Collett first. She's a public governor, and she says so many things to deserve congratulation this year, with, for example, the handling of COVID, the big new capital schemes that are underway, the planning permissions we've obtained, and so on. But her question is, what do you consider to be the biggest challenges over the next year before we meet again in the 2021 Annual Members Meeting. I was going to ask Mark Mould to start with perhaps a word or two about the COVID recovery before other people come in, if you're happy to do that, Mark, because that's an important priority for us in the coming year.
And thank you, David, and good afternoon, everybody. So the first thing I want to say is just how proud I am of our organisational and our people and our staff response to COVID. COVID continues to be a challenge nationally, regionally, and locally. And every time we switch on the TV, the radio, the first item is all about COVID. A couple of things I wanted to say about COVID is the work that we've been doing in the sense of establishing and responding to COVID has been done in conjunction with the Bournemouth site and aligned to the Dorset and the national system. When we mobilised our response to COVID, one thing we did have is our eye on recovery, recognising that a dual focus on both response and recovery is an important part of incident management. I suppose just trying to answer part of the question that's been posed, the recovery programme for COVID, we've got 3 priorities. 1, safely resuming clinical activity in a prioritised manner and supporting our staff to return to work and stay safe. Identify the changes we want to retain from the ways of working during the COVID-19 response and those we want to scale up. And finally, identifying and progressing the strategic opportunities to reshape our services and pathways for patients across the Poole and Dorset system. And an example I might give with that is our Home First initiative that is operating, that we're establishing across the Dorset system, which ensures that when patients are medically ready to leave, that actually we have support services in place to be able to support people in their own home. And then just finally, throughout COVID, the Trust has remained open to receive clinically urgent and cancer referrals, with additional support put in place with primary care for advice and guidance. And moving forward, we're going to have to live over the next 12 months alongside COVID. And when we plan for winter, which we're doing at the moment, and we will be sharing with our board of directors within the next month, COVID needs to be part of our thinking, so we're able to respond if we do have the anticipated further surge of activity. Can I stop there, David, and bring in Matt to give maybe some clinical perspective as well?
Yeah. No, exactly. I was going to ask Matt Thomas, our medical director, whether you want to say a word or two about the medical response and how our clinicians have worked together on this problem.
I can do it. I'm delighted to do so. It's a great question. What I jotted down as I was thinking about this question was, whatever I do, don't hold me to what I say, because if at the last meeting, Sharon, you would ask me the same question and I said, the biggest thing we've got coming is a pandemic, everybody would have had a bit of a giggle because nobody was expecting it. So I think this is one of the things that we live in. We live in a dynamic and volatile world where things can change, and we need to be agile and able to respond to whatever is thrown at us, whether it be meteorological, whether it be clinical, whether it be financial, whether it be social. And I think that's one of the things that we did learn during COVID. People pulled together. They developed things in a nimble and agile way. A fantastic response from colleagues within this trust, across the 2 trusts, which really started to lay a foundation for becoming one trust. People changed their working patterns. People adapted in the most incredible way that made me proud to be able to say that I had been involved. I could give many specifics about the way that people who were unfortunately, because of their own health reasons, were perhaps shielding at home, but remained fully engaged because our IT services had done great things about linking them in, so that they were conducting their ward rounds and clinics from their own home through the medium such as we're using now. There are probably too many ways that we responded to list in a meeting like this, but the important thing, Sharon, is we shouldn't forget what we did, because some of them we got wrong, and we shouldn't forget that we got them wrong, and we don't want to repeat trying to work that way, but some we really got right, and we need to maintain that. So a very quick example, the consultant physicians adapted their rotas and their work style to deal with sick patients coming into the hospital. Come the end of the first surge and looking at how they were going to return back to their old ways, they said, well, we don't want to go back to our old ways. This is better for the patient. And they've adapted a new way of working to do that. So I think many examples, but remaining nimble and agile to whatever is thrown at us is probably the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much, Matt. Sue, I wondered if you wanted to add a word or two from the nursing perspective about infection control, for example, has been absolutely vital to us and will be for the next year and following years for that matter. Sue, do you want to say anything in addition to Matt?
Yeah, thank you, David. I mean, I've been in a very privileged position. I've been at Poole for exactly 12 months. I came here from Bournemouth on a secondment, and I came here to understand how Poole worked and to understand the staff and people within the trust. It's been a really positive year for me. I think it's moving forward. I think we are going to be looking at the challenges around the workforce, supporting the workforce, making sure that they're fit and healthy to come to work. And with all of the changing guidance that we get, we've obviously have been dealing around the infection control guidance with use of PPE. And I think it's really vital as leaders that we support our staff to feel confident that they're delivering the care with the best possible protection that we have, and obviously that we're communicating any changes that we do have through to patients and to carers as well. So I think it's been a challenging 12 months, but I think it's going to be another challenging 12 months, but one that I think we can absolutely meet those challenges head on.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, I hope that was helpful, Sharon, to you. I'd like to pick up then on the second question we've had, which is what steps is Poole Hospital taking to oppose the closing of its A&E and maternity facilities? I will ask Debbie and others to come in on this, but just to say briefly, we understand why some people have got concerns about the future plans, but we have got tremendous plans to improve our emergency departments, to develop our 2 urgent treatment centres, to build a state-of-the-art maternity and children's unit, a much bigger intensive care unit. So it's a very positive story about the developments in this field in the years coming. So Debbie, do you want to give an initial response, and then I'll bring in some of our clinical leaders as well, because they've been very engaged in the design, optimising the design of our new emergency, maternity and so on, and they're very enthusiastic about it. Debbie.
Yes. Thank you, David. Thank you. And we know that this is something that local people have been really worried about and troubled by. But I do find that when anybody spends a bit of time looking at the facts and just actually understanding how services are organised now and how much better they'll be in the future, that they feel less worried. So we have to remember a couple of things. Firstly, at the moment, patients are not well served by having 2 emergency departments that we have to transfer people between. So quite often someone will attend one department but need to be transferred to the other hospital because the specialist service that they need is situated on the other site. So we know that between Poole and Bournemouth we have the highest number of ambulance transfers between these 2 sites compared with anywhere else in the country, because we're constantly having to move patients from one site to the right place for the care that they need, the emergency care they need. So it'll be much better bringing them all together under one site. We know that the ambulance service has fully supported these changes. and they've said that the 8 miles difference that between the two sites, wherever they go, they say actually that would be much better for them to be able to take patients to the one major emergency site. The new ED department will be 3 times larger than either of the existing departments, and it will be backed up by much better the whole range of the specialist emergency services that we need, and they will be much more robustly and consistently covered. So you will know that when you are, at the moment, we do a great job and we're really proud of what we do with our patients with a lot of workarounds. In the future, we will have the optimum arrangement, which is to have people going into one ED with the right backup and support and the right level of cover throughout that 7-day-a-week or 24-hour period. So we know it's better, and we've got to keep working to share that. The urgent treatment centre, there'll still be an urgent treatment centre at Bournemouth, and there'll be one at Poole, and we know that we're expecting 50 to 60,000 people to come into the Poole urgent treatment centre every year, and we know that if you walk into the hospital at the moment, you'll continue walking in there in the future, unless we've got something better to offer you in the community.
Thanks, Debbie. Matt, do you want to add a word or two about that, about the benefit of the strategy and to allay the understandable concerns that some people have?
Yeah, certainly, David, but I'm not sure that I can put it much better than what Debbie said. It's about the patient seeing the right person in the right place at the right time. I've dressed down today. I'm in my scrubs because I've been on the wards. And on my ward round yesterday, 10% of the patients that I saw needed to be transferred to Bournemouth. How much better it would have those people admitted to the right place at the right time, where the specialties they require can talk about them and develop the right pathway for that patient. I'm also interested in what I was listening to on the radio this morning, something that we've been hearing about in the medical world for a little while, which is the pilot about NHS 111 and the phoning up first to get your access to urgent treatment centres, etc. It could make a real difference to how we manage the patient flow and could mean that a lot of people will be seen in the right place, which for many will be the urgent treatment centre at Poole in the future. So I have every confidence that we are going to develop a service and a system that has the right people in the right place at the right time.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'll ask Jacqueline to come in and perhaps give a perspective from the staff point of view on this issue. Jacqueline, would you like to add a word or two?
Thank you, David. Well, again, I don't think I can necessarily add to the comments that Debbie and Matt have already given. I mean, you know, like many people, I think a number of our staff have been on a bit of a journey around a lot of the changes that have been proposed and that we are proposing over the next few years. But I think many of them, as they have understood more and more about what's proposed and the intentions behind it and the better care that we will be able to give, have begun to understand and fully appreciate and therefore get on board and support those changes, and are increasingly now working together. Many of our ED colleagues are working very closely together as they go forwards in transforming the services. So, as Debbie said, I think we all recognise that this has been talked about for a number of years. Many of our colleagues have had a better understanding as those years have gone on, and increasingly I think our staff are supporting the changes ahead as they understand the benefits that it will have for our patients.
Thank you very much. Well, we need to start winding up shortly because we're out of time. I haven't spotted any other questions yet at the moment, Kat, unless I've missed any. Is there anything that I have missed?
Questions that have come through other than those two.
I'm sorry, Kat, I missed that.
There's no other questions that have come through, just those two. I can see there's still 17 attendees on, so if they want to use the chat.
In that case, Kat, I'll draw the meeting to a conclusion with just a couple of remarks. We all recognise that the NHS is extremely important for local people, and we're very grateful for the fantastic support that we get We will do our very best, we can assure you, to deal with the COVID challenge and also to sustain and develop services and to enhance them in the years ahead. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you found it interesting and informative, and we very much hope that next time you can join us in person and maybe have some tea and buns and meet each other. So thank you again, and I'll formally close the meeting now. And thank you for the people behind the scenes who've been making the technology possible and organising the auditory systems. Until we meet again, as they say, that's all for today. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.